IEB, GDE, NSC, IB, GED, IGCSE, AS. You may be wondering if this is the new alphabet, where in fact, these are simply just some of the many matric and matric equivalent options that are available to South African students. Due to COVID-19, many parents have been contacting me as they try and navigate all these different options. In fact, the Education Department has recently revealed a scary fact, and that is that more than 120,000 students, I'm going to repeat that, more than 120,000 students have dropped out of school due to the COVID-19 impact. That's really scary stuff. So homeschooling has seen exponential growth over the last few years, and especially over the last few months. I am Sean Swartz, the CEO of SK Education Solutions. We are privileged to be joined by Lindsay Calder. Lindsay has worked in the education industry for the last 16 years with a particular focus on international qualifications. She has worked for Pearson, as well as was the academic manager for a Cambridge school with a particular focus on Cambridge IGCSE and AS levels. She also, over the last 6 years, has gained tremendous knowledge and insight into the American GED. Today, I would like to focus on one particular question I get asked nearly every single day. Just to put in some context, parents usually have their child enrolled in a GDE or an IEB traditional school. And if they are considering moving them out of a traditional school environment, for whatever reason it may be, they need to understand what the other options are. And in order to understand the options, I'd like to discuss the Cambridge IGCSE as well as the American GED with you, since this is your expertise, Lindsay. So Lindsay, thank you so much for agreeing to chat. And these are just some of the topics I'd like to discuss with you today. Number one, what is the American GED? What is Cambridge IGCSE? What is the difference between the two? And can I go and study at university with one of these? So to begin with, can you start off by explaining what the Cambridge IGCSE and AS levels are?
Sure, thanks so much for having me, Sean. So the Cambridge IGCSE is equivalent to grade 10 and 11 in the South African grades, and the AS level is equivalent to grade 12. Now you get both Pearson and Cambridge IGCSEs, but they are very similar in terms of how they're recognized in South Africa. Now an IGCSE is the international version of the traditional UK GCSE level. It covers students usually do 5 to 6 subjects at IGCSE level, and then they go down to 4 subjects at AS level. Cambridge IGCSE and AS level is quite academic, and it follows almost a similar way to the South African matric in terms of the set exam dates and the number of subjects that a student does.
So essentially, to get something with the equivalent of a South African matric or the NSC, the National Senior Certificate, you're basically saying that if you're doing the Cambridge system, you need to have your IGCSE subjects. I don't think we need to go into detail of how many, but essentially you need to get a whole bunch of IGCSE subjects, as well as over and above that, after you've passed the IGCSE subjects, you also need to do a whole set of AS level subjects. Is that right?
Yes, so you can, if they need to go straight into AS level, but it's something I really discourage because the way a student studies and is assessed is very different to the current national curriculum. So it's really recommended that students do the IGCSE level first and then go on to the AS level, as the one curriculum builds into the other curriculum. It's the same as you wouldn't do a grade 12 in South Africa without doing the grade 11. Another factor is when you're applying to, say, university, you would use your IGCSE results for your provisional acceptance at a university until you have your AS level results to confirm that acceptance.
Right, I got it. And just to add to that, international recognition of this Cambridge qualification?
So Cambridge is very widely recognized. I think it's one of the biggest curriculums around the world. And students, depending on their grades, can go anywhere in the world. Just if you're looking at going to university in, say, England, you would need to look at doing your full A levels, which is a year on top of the AS level, because the A level is made up of 2 years, with AS being your first level. So in South African standards, a full A level would almost be considered your 13th year of school.
Okay. Before we get into more detail on the Cambridge side of things, let's also just get an introduction to the other option, and that is the American GED. Can you talk us through that?
Sure. So the American GED is a slightly more flexible curriculum. It's made up of 4 subjects or 4 tests. And where the difference comes in is where the Cambridge, both IGCSE and AS level, has 2 set exam sittings a year, and you're very restricted that you are dictated the exam date because it's the same date written around the world. The GED, where it becomes flexible, is that a student can, if they want to study one subject at a time, book and write their test at any GED Pearson accredited testing center, and then move on to the next one. So there's students writing the GED test every day of the year. You book and write when you are ready. Also, you receive your results within 24 hours. And should you fail, you can book and rewrite straight away. You don't have to wait another 6 months before you can write. I think I need to add that GED is also considered equivalent to a grade 12 in South Africa.
Okay. So it seems as though relative to other examining bodies, the GED is a lot more, I guess, flexible and more stress-friendly in that you don't have to sit for a whole bunch of exams over a 1 or 2 week period at a specific time. You can literally study 1 or 2 subjects at a time, prepare for them, be relaxed, write the exams, and then move on to the next one. I guess that is a nice advantage over the Cambridge, but there are, and we'll get to it a little bit later, the pros and cons of both examining bodies. Relating to the GED, I mean, it is American, and again, can you just talk us through the international recognition?
So the GED does have international recognition around the world. I would say it's probably not as well recognized through Europe as Cambridge, but it is in many countries. It's obviously accepted by 98% of American universities and colleges. And we know some places just require the GED for acceptance, or a GED with an SAT, depending on the country and the institution.
Well, I guess that's only fair. I mean, even in South Africa, if you want to apply at many universities for some degrees, not only do you need your South African matric, but you also need your NBTs, which is very similar to the SAT. So I guess it's a similar thing. Can you just talk us through some of the pros and cons of, if you had to compare Cambridge and the GED?
Sure. So there's no right or wrong answer on which is the right curriculum to use. It really comes down to what type of student the student is that you're choosing the curriculum for. If we start with Cambridge, the IGCSEs and AS levels, They make use of critical thinking skills similar to the GED, where a student needs to understand the concept and then you go into the exam and apply that knowledge. So you're not expected to just rote learn stuff. It's really about understanding the concepts and applying the knowledge in that. The Cambridge curriculum is very academic. So for academic students, it's great. It's of a high standard. It's well recognized. And if a student wants to go study at a university in South Africa, Universities SA or USAF, they have a guide on how students can meet the requirements for either full exemption or conditional exemption. Where the difference between full exemption and conditional exemption comes in is for full exemption, a student in South Africa needs to do 2 languages, where conditional is you missing one requirement, such as your second language. So students can get accepted for medicine, for engineering with Cambridge. You need to obviously meet your subject grouping requirements for USAF, as well as your grade requirements and your exam sitting requirements. So it's very important when a student is looking at doing Cambridge that they start looking at the end goal being the exemption requirements before they even pick their IGCSE subjects, because a combination of IGCSE subjects and AS level subjects will be submitted to Universities SA for your exemption letter. So that's the one thing. The con is that Cambridge is quite high pressure. The curriculum is very full and students need to do a lot of subjects. Another thing is it's a bit more expensive than the GED, obviously because the number of subjects you're doing, the number of exams you're writing. The nice thing is if you are studying it on homeschooling on your own, you can choose to either do a practical exam in some of your subjects like science or biology, or there is an alternative to practical paper that you can do. So the con is really the level of stress, the exams, and that they're only available twice a year, and that you need to apply for exams almost 2 months before the exam date. If we go across and look at the GED, similar to Cambridge, is it makes use of critical thinking skills, which are really new age skills for students. It very much works on the basis of a student needs to understand the concept and apply it. The GED does not penalize for wrong spelling. But what is nice about it is that there's only 4 subjects. Students can study 1 to 2 subjects at a time. And the student can also write when they are ready to write. They're not dictated by what exam dates they can use. In South Africa, there's 40 testing centers around the country. One of the cons, however, about the GED is that Universities SA or USAF is no longer giving GED students from South Africa foreign conditional exemption to go to university. So what that means is that students who do study the GED, they can still apply to SAQA for their certificate of evaluation, which says the GED is the closest comparable qualification to the National Senior Certificate or grade 12. But students would need to look at a bridging course before they apply to university for a degree, such as a higher certificate at NQF level 5. So although the GED, some people could call it a quicker route, there is an extra hurdle in going to university. So time-wise, the two equate each other out. It just depends on what type of student you are, whether you're a more practical student who then wants to go the GED route versus a more academic student who would go the Cambridge route.
Okay, and with Cambridge, as you mentioned, there's a huge array of different subjects that you can choose from. The GED you mentioned, there's only 4 exams or 4 subjects, but can you just explain that? Because it doesn't make sense that there's only 4 exams. Are there, in each of those exams, are there more subjects, or how does that work?
Yeah, so while it has 4 tests, within those subjects or tests, there are multiple subjects. So if I take, for example, Social studies, it does cover a bit of American history, but it also goes into geography, politics, history. So within the subjects, there's multiple topics or specializations that are brought in. So in fact, you are studying more subjects, but you're being tested in 4 tests across those multiple subjects.
So essentially with a GED, you have to study many more subjects than just 4 subjects, but they're combining some of the topics or some of the subjects into one test.
Yes.
Okay. And you said that there are 40 different centers around the country. Just talk us through like how, if I decided I want to study the GED and I want to start, can I start now? Did I already miss the start of the semester? How would it work?
Okay, so essentially, you can start studying at any time. The testing age is 17 years. So we really recommend that students only start studying from the age of 16, because you cannot study before the age, you cannot write your test before the age of 17. If I hop across to Cambridge, the IGCSE is designed for 14 to 16-year-olds, and then the AS level is designed for 17 and 18-year-olds.
And for the GED, as you mentioned, you would simply just, what will you do? Just book an exam whenever you're ready, or how does that work?
Yeah, you can start studying the GED at any time in the year. The GED actually has reviewed and approved several content providers in terms of, or content publishers, and there is fantastic online learning content that really is comprehensive and covers the full curriculum. So students can start studying at any time. When they're ready to write an exam, they book on their GED.com profile. They book the time, the date that suits them at their closest testing center.
I think that's an incredible option. I mean, the fact that you don't have to wait for a particular date in October or November. When you're ready to write the exam, you can literally choose the date, as you said, the time, and the venue that you want to write at, and you simply just rock up at that venue and write your exam. Is that how it works? And do you have to wait for your results? Do they mark them, or how does that work?
Okay, so how it works is obviously to ensure the credibility of the GED, there are very stringent security procedures in place at testing centers, because at the end of the day, the GED is an internationally quality assured qualification. So you need to take your ID documents with you, make sure you have the identification documents required, which you will know beforehand what they are. You book, you arrive at the testing center, you can write, and then within 24 hours, you'll receive your results through your GED.com profile that you register. It's free to register your GED.com profile, and your scores will be there. Once you pass all 4 subjects, you receive an electronic diploma and transcript. The diploma is issued by the Superintendent of Education from the Department of Education in Washington, D.C., America.
Okay. And on the other side of the coin with the Cambridge, you need to be, I guess, more organized in advance. You need to know exactly which subjects you're studying at a particular time. And then you said you have to book 2 months in advance. Just talk us through that. Like, how do I book? Where do I write my exams? How often can I write them? When do I get my results?
Okay, so for Cambridge, what it is you can write at any Cambridge accredited school or at any British council. Now, on the Cambridge website is a list of Cambridge accredited schools, and it also specifies whether the school accepts external candidates. It's always recommended that you contact the school in advance to just check that they still accept external candidates. So normally January, February, you're applying for your May, June exams, and June, July, August, probably you're applying for your October, November exams. October, November results, they come out the next year, January, And your May, June results, I think they come out about August. So there's a bit of a delay. The delay is there's actually 7 markers that mark each paper for Cambridge. And that's why it takes so long, is because it is checked. It's always important to note is, as per those exemption requirements, that you work out your exam sittings, because for university exemption in South Africa, the subjects that you're going to be submitting for exemption, you need to do in a maximum of 2 exam sittings, although the May, June, and October, November exams of the same year are considered 1 exam sitting. But you also don't want to do a subject with Cambridge in IGCSE level and then not look at it for 6 months to a year and then do it at AS level again, because you'll lose those fundamentals that you need to know to move on to the AS level. It's like you wouldn't do a subject in grade 11, not do it for a while, and then suddenly pick it up in grade 12 again. You need to think of, you almost need to, I compare the Cambridge academic structure to the NSC structure, or the South African schooling structure, is that it's very structured and it goes according to the academic year of South Africa.
You're saying don't just jump into anything, plan in advance, make sure that you've got everything in place. It sounds quite complex, this exam sitting structure, but I guess if you get an expert and you speak to an expert or a Cambridge homeschooling environment or school or college, they can definitely advise as to how and when you need to structure your subject so that you satisfy all these sitting requirements, because it sounds quite complex, but I'm sure it's quite easy once you do understand it.
It comes down to, it's important for students and parents to look at what they want to do after school as to how they decide which curriculum to follow. Yes.
And so going on to that is specifically for Cambridge now. Once you do pass all your exams, do you also get a certificate of some sort that how do you then start the process of applying to university?
Okay, so actually, like on the South African system, you actually apply on your IGCSEs initially to your university of choice or several universities of choice. And on those results, they'll review them and give you provisional acceptance. You then do your AS results. When you receive your AS results on your transcript, you will then submit that to University South Africa. They will review it and then they will issue you, if you meet the requirements, they'll issue you complete exemption. When you receive that complete exemption, you submit that letter together with your results to the university to confirm your acceptance.
Okay. And just to take a little bit of a step back, I don't fully understand this. For the IEB and the GED, when you finish that and you pass, you get an NSC, or National Senior Certificate, which is a diploma. It's a piece of paper that says you have passed your matric, essentially. For the American GED, you mentioned the same thing. You get a GED diploma issued by the Department of Education in Washington, D.C. What do you get when you finished your AS level exams? Do you get a diploma? Do you get anything?
So you get an AS. So what it is like when you finish matric in South Africa, you get a piece of paper or certificate with the subjects you did and the grades you got per subject. Very similar for Cambridge. You'll get a certificate or letter with your list of subjects and your results.
And then that, together with any other paperwork, you take that to USAF and you apply to be able to get a letter so that you can then go and apply to your university of choice to go and study. You mentioned that you can't do that with the GED. So what are the options? Is it even worth doing it if you can't go and study at university?
So the GED, the South African Qualifications Authority, you can apply to them for your certificate of evaluation, which would evaluate the GED as being similar to a grade 12. I don't want to go into the official terms because it gets a bit confusing. But in simplistic language, your GED would be equivalent to grade 12.
So
Now,
with that letter from SAQA, the South African Qualifications Authority, if I wanted to go and get a job somewhere that requires a matric as a minimum, could I do that?
yes, you could.
So I would take my SAQA letter and my diploma with me, and I would then be able to apply for a job that requires a matric.
Yes, and most jobs, I think even most fast food restaurants require a matric or matric equivalent. So you can definitely go apply for a job with it. You can also apply for certificates, higher certificates. You know, you can also apply for other courses at tertiary institutions. You would just need to complete those courses before you consider applying for a degree. So you're not going to do the GED and go become a neurosurgeon. If you're that way inclined and that way academic, rather go the Cambridge route. But if you want to go and study a course in public relations or a design course or something like that, then the GED should suffice.
Or a BCom.
Disclaimer, always check with the institution first. No acceptance, whether it's Cambridge or GED, we can't guarantee it. It comes down to the admissions office at the institution.
Okay, so in summary, from a GED perspective, you can study further, but you have to study at a lower level first. So you study, which is a lower level than a bachelor degree. You can study, like you said, a higher certificate of some sort, and once you have completed your higher certificate, which is usually a one-year certificate, then with your GED plus your higher certificate, you can then go and apply to university to do a degree. Is that right? Yes. Whether they'll accept you or not is up to the university, but the doors then open. Okay, excellent. Any other advice that you can give parents and students that are considering or at least investigating both Cambridge and the American GED as to what they should look at before they jump into anything?
Yeah. I think it's really important to look at what type of child you have, because not every curriculum suits every child and what they really want to do with their life after they finish schooling. Also, both curriculums have wonderful learning support documents or learning content. I would say Cambridge is probably more hard copy based in terms of books, where the GED is more online based. It's really, if you're making the switch to homeschooling from mainstream school, it's set up a structure. Don't just leave your child on their own to go study unless they have a tutor. Remember, at the end of the day, they're still kids. They still need support and guidance on their schooling, unless you've got a tutor who keeps them on track and up to date with their studies.
And you mentioned that the American GED, a lot of students use very good online learning content. You just mentioned that the Cambridge, a lot of it is hard copy based and book based. Is there not the online learning option as well for Cambridge students?
I'm sure there are. There's a lot of providers around that offer online learning content, whether for GED or Cambridge. You're right, a lot probably are online. It's just make sure that they're credible providers, that it offers good quality content, because you want to ensure that your child has all the resources needed to fully prepare for the exams.
Okay. Something that we haven't clarified just before we end off, the actual exams, Cambridge exams and then the GED exams, are they paper-based, computer-based? How do you write those exams?
So the Cambridge exams are paper-based. You go in and do your old school written exam. And you normally have 2 to 3 papers per subject that you write. And then obviously, as I mentioned, you've got the choice for some of the subjects, whether you do the practical exam or the alternative to practical exam, which is written. The GED, the exams are online. So you'd go into a testing center and do your exam online.
So when you say online, it's done on a computer, but I can't do it at home online.
No.
No.
As same as Cambridge, it has to be an accredited testing center.
Okay, so I go to an accredited testing center and I use their computers to write the exams.
Yeah, for both exams. Obviously, Cambridge, you can take your calculator and your pens and pencils in, but I mean, when you take your pens and pencils in, it has to be in a clear bag, like a Ziploc or something, so that the tester can see all your pens and pencils. For the GED, you're not allowed to take anything into the exam. You even provided with an on-screen calculator.
Wow, okay. And I assume because it's all online and that there's proper invigilation processes in place with cameras and everything else. Okay, well, that's been very, very, I think, useful and a lot of information that you've given. One last tip that you can give us?
Sure, that's a tricky one. I would think really review both curriculums and the pros and cons of each curriculum. Speak to experts, speak to people who know the curriculums, do your research before you switch. It's a big decision that you're making. So really do your research before you switch and speak to as many people as you can, and then make the decision.
Lindsay, thank you so much for all your expertise and your knowledge and your time. Thank you again.
Thank you.